I'm Evelyn Ficarra, and I instigated the robot opera research project in 2017, in fact. And initially it felt like a kind of natural outgrowth of my sound art practice. So I've been fascinated by sound objects since I started composing, really. And this idea of finding the voice of the object, of recording sounds and making audio speakers out of ordinary objects, putting the sounds that they make back through the object as an audio speaker. And so in a way, the step towards robots was a natural outgrowth of that, the robot also being an object that makes sounds, but one that can actually move as well. I think it was 2014, 2015 when I sort of thought to myself, you know how ideas just pop into your head? I should write a robot opera. I wonder if anyone's done that already. So I went to the computer, and of course people had, the most famous one being Todd Machover's Death and the Powers, which he did with MIT. And what was striking about that was that there were a lot of really fascinating robots on stage, non-humanoid robots, but that sounded like humans. So they made the sound of human opera singers. And so I thought to myself, well, what would a robot opera be where the robots weren't trying to sound human, where they were being their robot selves and making their robot sounds, and what would singing be for a robot? So I got in touch with Ron Crisley, who's a reader in informatics here at Sussex, and it so happens that he had two robots in his office, two little Now robots made by SoftBank Robotics. And so I persuaded him that we could make a robot opera together, and I coerced another colleague of mine, Professor Ed Hughes, wonderful composer. And so Ed and I each wrote a short opera for these two Now robots, little like toddler-sized robots. And Ron did the programming for us, and Tim Hopkins came to direct that show. And so that show was really about robots being on stage. How do we read their presence on stage? How can I work with their voices so that they could sing? And what was interesting was they have this text-to-speech mechanism, but they couldn't really sing. So for example, a human can go, ah, but the robot could only go a. So we kind of played with that and had a lot of fun with that. So that was the first one in 2017. The second one in 2019, we had the chance to work with a pepper robot, and that's made by the same company, but it's bigger, and it can, it has certain, like the Nows, it has certain artificial intelligence attributes. It can respond to you and so on. And for that one, I wanted to try what it would be like to have not just robots on stage, but a robot and a human. So we got a wonderful singer, Loré Lixenberg, in, and we had some time workshopping with her. We got her colleague, Anton Lukoszevieze, who's a cellist, amazing cellist, and I got one of our then graduate students, Sam Bilbo, to design a robot cello, which is sitting here next to me. So we had a robot human, or rather we had a robot and a human, and we had a robot cello and a human cellist. And we made a piece together exploring human-robot interaction through just creative practice and play. So this time around, I wanted to do something different, and I had come across Engineered Arts, who are a company in Cornwall. I'd seen a play in London which starred one of their robots. So there was a robot actually as a full character in a play. And I had a look at their work and talked to their executive director, Will Jackson, and they have this new range of what they call Mesmer robots who look very human. They have the silicone skin and the real hair, and I thought this was really very different territory from the SoftBank robots, because the SoftBank robots look very robotic. They're not trying to be human. They're humanoid, but they're not really trying to be human, whereas this one is. So I've luckily got the same musicians back again. And I feel like what we're exploring now is very much to do with inside and outside. Inside the robot, there's a lot of machinery. That's why if you look at a close-up of the robot, you'll see we've asked that the silicone not be put on one of the forearms so that we reveal its robotic otherness, if you like. So we're kind of exploring different levels of human and non-human, robot and non-robot, and wanting to change from one world to the other. And I suppose I'm particularly exploring that through voice. So again, these robots have a kind of text-to-speech mechanism. It's slightly different from the other one, so I'm finding that it can do slightly more singerly things, but still sounding quite robotic, which is really interesting to me. I'm trying to explore what is robotic vocal virtuosity, like what does that mean, what would that sound like? And I also wanted to explore a kind of hybrid vocal area between robot and human. So I've been recording a lot of sounds from my human as well as from the robot, and chopping them up and sticking them in my computer and mapping them out to my computer keyboard so that I can actually type and like spell out actual words of text, and it will come out as sound. And it'll come out sounding like a sort of weird speech that you can't quite understand. And then I sort of drop longer sung tones into that so it can morph between the sort of odd, sort of robotic human speaking more towards singing. And that's kind of what we're exploring vocally. So there's other sounds in the piece. I actually went and visited the robot factory. I recorded the sounds of them manufacturing the robot. So there's a lot of 3D printing goes into making a robot. There's a lot of drills and all kinds of mechanical stuff. So I thought it would be interesting to make some sounds that I could then use for the robot speech. So when we're exploring the robot at its most mechanical, its most robotic, when she opens her mouth, all that comes out is machine noises. And that gradually gets kind of eroded away by dropping in human-sounding syllables and kind of all messed up in this hybrid machine-human kind of world. And so the robot and the humans kind of go on this vocal journey where they meet in the middle and they explore this quite interesting, playful kind of texture. And then they each carry on, and the singer goes more towards machine sounds and the robot goes more towards the kind of regular, what we think of as normal computer voice, if you like. So neither of them ends up as being like full straight ahead human. They all have this kind of otherness within them. And I feel like that's part of what we're exploring is otherness. A lot of what's happening with Cleo is some of it's pre-recorded and set, and it's put into the robot software and it plays. And what I've found in rehearsal is that although sometimes her movements get stuck, her arm gets stuck or whatever, the voice just seems to keep going. So I'm not too worried about that. But there is improvisation because in some of the pieces I'm actually typing, improvising sounds that are coming, as it were, from the robot myself. So there is an improvisational character to what is happening musically, for sure. And in terms of the soundscape, I've also got a lot of sounds in my computer that I'm making happen live as well. So there's a really strong improvisational side. For me, if the robot goes wrong, that's in a way, that's the robot expressing its agency. You know, it's like, we tell it to do all these things and it might not do them, just have to cope. So I think that's okay. I think that's quite interesting, actually.